So, welcome. What a beautiful, beautiful day. And I'm so glad that you could come tonight and it not be freezing and not be raining, but gorgeous. So, tonight, you know that we live in a floodplain, and we're going to talk about it with Miss Lisa Raleigh of French Broad RiverLink. Okay, here we go. And I don't think I asked her. Okay, so you all know that we partner with Ollie, and we have a student tech right outside who's about to run in to rescue me and rescue Lisa when we don't know what we're doing. How many of you guys are members of Ollie? Oh, great. And you know they're not really enforcing after 5 o'clock, but before 5 o'clock, you need to do the parking deal. You need to have your license plate registered, and pretty much that's it. You know, $5 a whack or the parking ticket for the whole shooting match. We are one branch of the Sierra Club. There are 3 levels. The National Sierra Club in the Sky. If you will become a member online, you will get a beautiful, shiny magazine every month that will tell you our international trips, that will do very thoughtful articles on the roadless rule, et cetera, and it's wonderful. This screen right here is for the state chapter. They're over in Raleigh, and I always think of them. They're trying to save our coastlines, you know, wind farms, and the big one is, you know, this crazy thing that Great Britain and Europe think that they can come over here, renewable energy, cut down our forests, make it into chips, ship it off to England, burn it up, and that, bam, the forest will go on forever. So we're trying to get the governor and everyone to ban that, but it's private land. But the ones that you want to know about is us. We are Western North Carolina Sierra Club. And if you are not members, then please go to our website, which is just WNCSierraClub.org. Sign up for our newsletter and join and help us. We want to acknowledge with great respect that we are on Cherokee land, and we owe a great love and debt to these people for protecting our beautiful lands, our beautiful forests, and we honor them. This is our program every first Wednesday of the month. And if you are interested, the hour before at 5 o'clock, straight upstairs is our leaders meeting. And we have about 20 people, half on Zoom, half in person, where we put our wonderful brains together to say, okay, what next programs do we want to deal with? What elections do we want to take on? What alerts? What letters do we want to write? So we'd love to have you join. That's my contact. You can sign up for the e-newsletter out front. There's also a QR code that you can click, and that will take you to sign up for the newsletter, and that gives you all the information. We have a Kids Adventure Club, which is really fun. Right now, there's one more week left with the Asheville Middle School kids, and we've taken them, as you can see, to the Arboretum, the Cradle of Forestry, the Nature Center, and they'd love to have a mentor just like you. We're going to pick it up again in January, and it's once a week, every afternoon for about an hour. So if you're interested, come talk to me or talk to Ed Maggart. And then in the summer, we work with like Stevens Lee and Shiloh and a number of community centers and take those kids out. And it's fun. We have an upcoming hike. If you've never been to Morris Cove, you'll have a treat. It's Tuesday in 2 weeks, and you need to contact Ed. Oh, here we go, political. So our wizard is sitting over here in his chair. So, Mr. Brame, why don't you give us an update, starting with national?
Sure. Is this on? Okay, good. Yeah, well, first of all, I apologize for not being able to limp up to the podium here, but I'm a little bit limited with my walker after a surgery. Anyway, it was a really amazing election day yesterday across the country. Certainly, if you were interested in how Democrats did, they significantly exceeded expectations in polling and everything else. But from an environmental standpoint, the Sierra Club endorsed candidates for governor for New Jersey and Virginia, won by double digits. And these are states that President Harris only carried by 6 points, so they significantly outperformed that. And the New Jersey race, it was actually projected that maybe the Democrat might win or our endorsed candidate might lose. So anyway, they also picked up 10 seats in the Virginia House of Delegates, which gives them a now comfortable margin to pass environmental legislation. California passed a redistricting initiative, which gives us a chance by 64 to 36%, which gives us a chance to elect hopefully 5 more pro-environmental candidates in California. All 3 of the state Supreme Court justices in Pennsylvania were retained. And again, they were supported by the Sierra Club in their retention. So again, a big thing. And again, this was a race, a state that Trump carried last time. So that was, and they won comfortably. In Georgia, we have 2 new members of the State Public Utilities Commission that were endorsed by the Sierra Club. Democrats have won statewide races. And that's not usually what happens in Georgia. There aren't many statewide races that we're able to win there. So that was a big win and a real sign. In Mississippi, Democrats flipped 3 legislative seats, breaking the supermajority in Mississippi. And some of the other trends are interesting. If you read any of the analysis of last year's election, Latino votes shifted towards Trump from the traditional Democratic majority. In both Virginia and Pennsylvania, they shifted back by over 20 points back towards the Democrats. Wow. So that's a good sign going into and maybe a rebuke for what's going on with some of the enforcements and with immigration. Locally, we endorsed 10 candidates, mayor and 3 city council or town council seats in Weaverville, and 3 town council seats in Woodfin, and 3 candidates for Woodfin Water and Sewer Board. 9 of the 10 won, including the mayor of Weaverville. So that was successful. We were sorry to lose the one, but it was still a really good night for us. And we had volunteers out on early voting and election day handing out our endorsement cards. And many of the candidates indicated that that was very helpful for them, and they appreciated it. So I think that worked. Across the state, the Sierra Club endorsed in 21 other races, in everything from Carrboro to Cary to small towns around the Raleigh area and in Charlotte and some other places. Of those, we endorsed in 24 races, 21 of our endorsed candidates won. And the big one was Charlotte had a 1-cent tax increase on the ballot to fund their mass transit, bike lanes, and other transportation alternatives. And that won narrowly 52% to 48%. So that's a big win. And the Sierra Club actually had an organizer there for the last couple of months, helping mobilize our volunteers and to help make sure that passed. So a lot of things going on. So what does that mean for North Carolina next year? We all care about that. Well, we've done the analysis and we found that there are, oops, if I don't drop that, there are 5 state house seats that are within a 3% margin that we could replace anti-environmental candidates with pro-democratic and pro-environmental candidates, which would then take away the ability for a few crossover Democrats to vote with Republicans to override vetoes. In addition to that, we've identified 4 Democrats who consistently crossed over and voted with the Republicans to overcome vetoes, particularly taking away the requirement that Duke Energy meet their energy carbon reduction goals and extending that from 2030 out to 2040. So we're going to be targeting those 4 in the primaries. In the state Senate, we need to pick up 1 seat to sustain vetoes. There are 3 seats that are in 3% that we, with a Democratic wave, we think we can pick up. So all that being said, we're going to need volunteers, starting with the March primary, to hand out our endorsement cards. And again, next fall, one of the most contested seats in the state will be here in Buncombe County for the Lindsey Prather's seat for the State House. We have to keep. In addition to that, we've also had a big fundraiser 2 weeks ago. And in that, the most money we had ever raised before at one of our PAC fundraisers was $69,000. We went over 80,000, close to 82,000 this time. So we're getting the war chest together to make a difference so that we could take back this state. Thank you.
Okay, so we're turning to you. This is our endorsement card from yesterday. Now, on March, it's going to be filled up with state and county and all kinds of people. So what we would like you to do is sign your life away right now. These two wonderful men from Asheville High School right here have sign-up sheets. Some of you have already signed up. But all it means is that we can contact you, and of course you can say no, something's come up. But there are 2 weeks in February, starting mid-February to the end, and then March 4th, we usually have 10 early voting sites, including almost all the libraries, the South Library, the North Library, the West, the East, the libraries, but also different places. And then on election, that's for early, and there's about 10, 14 days. And we try to do 3 shifts on each of those days. And then on election day, Tuesday, from 6:30 in the morning, but we only get there merely at 7 in the morning. Hey, how could you complain? Until 7 at night, and we have 4 shifts. So we would like that if you add up the numbers, that's 250 people. But you know what? A lot of those people will take multiple shifts. They don't just do one. They will do 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, So anyway, if you would be willing for us to contact you in January and February to say, what do you think? These young men are going to walk around, raise your hand, and sign up, and you can refuse when we talk to you in January. Okay, so moving along. It is election time, and golly gee, we've got to elect the officers of our Winoka, Western North Carolina Sierra Club. And guess what? I'm one of them running. So when you get your ballot, vote for me, okay. A couple of other people. Is Nancy Waldrop still around the corner? I don't think she is. So these are the names that you'll see. Nancy is currently our vice chair. Caitlin Constantine is our secretary, and Rob Campbell is the new kid on the block, and he's wonderful. We also have 2 candidates for the big guys over in Raleigh. And they are Ed Maggard, who is our hike leader, and Drew Ball, who, my gosh, he is now a, what is he, Ken? He is a county commissioner, is that right? So he's running for all kinds of stuff. So when you get your ballot, please vote for us. And the ballot will come online, or it will come on the Footnotes newsletter, or it will come mailed to you. Okay, December, we're not having a meeting, we're having a potluck fun party. It will be at the church where we used to get together, Unitarian Church. How many of you guys know where the Unitarian Church is? Yeah, almost all of you. It's 1 Edwin Place from 5:30 to 7:30. It's a potluck. Bring your dish. Put the ingredients on the card, because some people are allergic and some people are vegan, and they need to have a choice to know what's in it. So if you can come a little early and help us set up, we would love that too. Golly, I guess you can't read this, but this is super floods. NOVA just put out a week ago this incredible program, and if you can read the top, they compared for about, 60 minutes, 20 of it about Asheville, 20 of it about Texas flooding. Do you remember the flood in Texas that killed those girls that were in the camp? You guys all remember that? And the flood in Spain, do you remember that flood where all those cars were smashed down that really narrow? So guess what? We're all the same. Do you believe that? Asheville, Texas, Spain, it will really knock your socks off. So please consider looking at it. And surprise, surprise, Miss Lisa Raleigh. And I guess maybe you know her, but let's see. Lisa has come from the West. She's got a doctorate in, help me out, Lisa, hydrology. Did I say that right? And she just knows about water. And she's been with RiverLink now for a couple of years. And right now she is running as hard as she can run to try to keep the river safe and in balance for us to make good decisions on the bank and what we're doing in terms of not building back, but building back smart. Okay, you're gonna put up Lisa's contact.
I have to decide if I want to be on this microphone or that microphone or which one of these I want to do. Awesome, thank you so much. Thank you, you guys. I really appreciate being here. It's crazy to think I was here a year ago today to the day, and we were just reeling. We were reeling from the election, and we were reeling from the early days of Helene. So I really appreciate the opportunity to come back and talk a little bit about here we are a year later. You have to be smart enough to use the clicker. Forward, no. Backward, no.
For me, I had to use the mouse, but maybe.
She was helping me there, okay. I don't know. Can you get me clicking? I'm sorry. So many of, what are we clicking? Oh, good, it's not just me, I feel better about that, okay. Whoa. Is it one of these side buttons? Okay, awesome. So some of the things I'm going to say are still similar to a year ago, but we've had a lot of time to reflect and we have a lot more information, and Judy was just talking about a lot of flooding that continues. So just an updated kind of version of where we are. For those of you that aren't familiar with RiverLink, we have this really unique dual mission, and that's to promote both the environmental and economic vitality of the French Broad River watershed, and to do so for all. And so that economic piece has really played a huge role when we look at our recovery. We also have a really rich history with the region. Our visionary founder, Karen Craig-Nolan, she got here in the late 80s, and she really championed the French Broad River because at that time, Asheville had a huge disconnect from the river, and the river was just defined by heavy industry. It was dilapidation everywhere, really neglected, and had chronic industrial pollution. And so thanks to Karen and many others, they started to treat it with more care, and they did a whole bunch of community gathering and visioning and just got this plan for the region. And abandoned warehouses were converted. It became what ultimately was the River Arts District, this thriving, vital place. But unfortunately, Helene just tested all of that and beyond. And so here we are all looking at what does it mean to rebuild more resilient, and what does it mean to be in a river's floodplain? So as you guys know, like this is the Great Flood of 1916 that really bookended our region. None of us here are old enough to remember it, and that is a challenge with humans. Yet here we are in 2024, near identical except for 1.5 feet higher, but exact same kind of catastrophic play. So tonight, I want to touch on just 4 topics kind of quickly and efficiently, but number one, we here in our region, in the nation, and globally, we've got to prepare to get wet. Flooding is becoming a way of life in a lot of regions, and we'll touch on why that is. What does it mean to be in a floodplain and to develop in a floodplain? And what a tremendous shared responsibility that is when we do that. And then this one, near and dear to RiverLink, like what is the purpose of riverbanks? What are they supposed to be? What's their role? And what happens when we compromise them? And then lastly, we've got to continue to look at ways to lessen urban pressures if we want to reduce loss of lives, livelihoods, and environmental damage. So first up, prepare to get wet. Our region, Western North Carolina, Asheville, we constantly have flooding. It might be nuisance or small or medium, but we live in a really water-rich area. This is a way of life for us. And unfortunately, every now and then, it can be hugely catastrophic. So the French Broad River, this is just a graph to show you how often, she can flood. If she hits 13 plus feet, you can expect to see water in the River Arts District, and at 20 plus feet, you can have major flooding like we did during Helene. But the bottom yellow line is like right at around 12 feet. So you see how often the French Broad flirts with flood stage over the past 100 years. But the Swannanoa is the real culprit. She has a chronic habit of flooding, and it doesn't take much. At 10 feet flood stage, she's getting into the village, starting to flood. At 14 feet, the impact is on the buildings and the infrastructure. And at 16 and a half feet, it can inundate the entire village. Well, we had the Swannanoa in the 20s. But look how often that bottom of the yellow line is 10 feet where she can start flooding the area. This is chronic, right, that we see this. So what sets us up and is concerning is we have a really unique danger here. The French Broad River is a big, large, broad river. So she's prone to riverine flooding, which is the traditional slow flooding that takes a couple days, to start to come up and rise. But we have this mountainous terrain that can lend itself to flash flooding. And that's where you get a really rapid amount of moisture in a short amount of time, and you get a whole lot of water running. So the situation that we're faced with here is we're prone to both these types of flooding, and when they happen together, they can be catastrophic. So in 1916, in 2004, and during Helene, we had a precursor rain event. So we had riverine flooding going on. The French Broad was starting to get out of her banks. She was in the river parks down on Amboy Road. But then when the tropical storm arrived, it brought all this additional moisture in a very short amount of time, and it basically activated the entire watershed in a flash flood scenario on already swollen riverine river flooding. And so if you heard me speak a year ago, one of the things about the Swannanoa in particular that is so concerning is that very small docile river on any given day, who's only a few feet wide and a couple feet deep, is serving a monstrous watershed. The watershed is big, and it includes all of the high peaks of the surrounding area. So any rain that falls in that footprint and gets saturated has no choice but to work its way down to the Swannanoa. And this is a photo right below our house. We live in Black Mountain, and we just live above the Swannanoa. So after the storm abated enough on that, was this Friday now? I can't even remember our days. We walked down, and this is when I think the magnitude of the situation hit us. This is the Swannanoa's headwaters. She starts here, and she was running like the Mississippi and had to get all the way 18 miles down to the French Broad River, all the tributaries, all the inputs, get through Biltmore Village and into the French Broad. And so this is just our setup and our reality. And so we've got to, this cannot be harnessed and contained. We've got to figure out how to work with it. Something else that's wreaking havoc is we continue to warm. Our atmosphere is warming and our oceans are warming. And so as a result, hurricane intensity is being fueled by these incredibly warm waters. So since they've been measuring sea level temperatures since the early 1900s, it continues to rise every year. And last year we set a record high. I'm sure we will again this year. Also compounding our situation is the Southeast has increased precipitation. So we're a little microcosm within the whole setting, and we're getting more and more rains here. And they expect this trend to continue, contributing to more severe flooding risks. So the future predictions are not great. They expect the Southeast to be one of the hot spots for flood disasters because of these extreme rain events. And in our case, Western North Carolina, we've got this mix of riverine flooding compounded by the potential for flash flooding. Two articles, or one article, one documentary you've got to see. Earlier this week, the Washington Post had this article on deadly rivers in the sky, and it was talking about these extreme rain events and what is behind them. And the second one is the Superfloods documentary that Judy was referring to. Both of these are highlighting why we're getting ungodly amounts of rain in small amounts of time. So in the case of both Valencia, Spain, and the central Texas floods, I mean, we're talking inches and inches and inches of rain in like an hour or an hour and a half. And the article in this film explain what the mechanism is behind it, but this is our future. As long as we're this warm and the atmosphere keeps warming, it's gonna hold more and more moisture and it's gonna catastrophically dump it. And there's geographic elements like our escarpment that make us really prone to this type of weather. So check out both of those if you get a chance to just heighten your awareness around that. So shifting gears, what does it mean to be in a river's floodplain? So a floodplain is simply nature's mechanism for handling a surplus of water. Like nature knew what it was doing when it gave a river a floodplain. The 100-year floodplain concept is not nature's idea, it is ours. And we created it as a practical tool to try to manage flood risk. But the problem with this concept is people misinterpret it. This is not a guarantee of when a flood is going to occur. FEMA maps can't be dynamic, they're static. So this 1 in 100-year concept is based on data that is behind us, different atmosphere, circumstances, and is not our reality. Basically, this risk is changing, it is not fixed. And so one could even say what was a 100-year floodplain, in prior times, today might be a 50 or 25-year floodplain. So yes, they're remapping, but this is a very flawed system because people latch on to, oh, it's not gonna happen again for 100 years. And then they hear 500-year and 1,000-year and they're super psyched because they're like, great, this is not gonna happen for another 500 years. But that's not how probability works. It's reset every minute of every day and the statistical chance is always the same. Even more challenging is 100-year floodplain or not, only 14% of the population actually lives in a designated floodplain, yet 33% of the claims come from outside the floodplain. And so you see that here, we had so many secondary tributaries that flooded hugely. We had landslides, like even the 100-year floodplain is not a panacea to safety. So there's a movement to say, get away from the static floodplain on the left and move to a more dynamic one. So like First Street is an organization that is saying, we want to be risk-based, probabilistic, and dynamic. So just look at the Swannanoa corridor. Their proposed flood coverage is probably almost close to 100% more and just gives you a sense of how many people are in harm's way on tributaries and on the main stem. So this one's been hard since Helene. If we're going to be in floodplains, I don't think we can deny the risk. I think we have to accept the risk. And depending on what audience you're in and how people feel about that, but there is just a huge, enormous indicator if you're in a river's floodplain. This is not like other natural disasters. My husband's from Oklahoma. I went to school and grad school in Oklahoma. Tornadoes seemed somewhat, I don't know, random to me. We had things called Tornado Alley, but that did not mean we actually knew where the tornado was going to go. If you are in a river's floodplain and there is a flood, there is a guaranteed chance you will get wet. So I feel like we should do better understanding that. We should prepare to flood. There's good tools out there. This is one that North Carolina has. It's the Flood Risk Information System, FRIS. So this is RiverLink's offices. This is a dynamic on, anyone can use it. You plug in an address, and if you're in a floodplain, it'll give you a better sense of, hey, what's your chance of flooding this year, 15 years, or 30 years? This is a little more dynamic, right? It can't tell you to what height. It can't tell you, what kind of frequency, but it just says, this is a high-risk location. Yeah, we're in the lower RAD, right? That is a high-risk location. That's on us to manage that risk. So this, if anything has come out of this for RiverLink and us, is really saying, if we're going to be in floodplains, this is a tremendous shared responsibility. It starts with our jurisdictions. The Washington Post this summer ran a pretty detailed article on Helene and Western North Carolina's response. And, it concluded that Buncombe County and Asheville, by extension, really lacked formal flood evacuation plans and any orders. They came too late. And just this huge challenge of mountainous terrain and limited planning. So when you're coastal, it's a way of life, right? You've been under siege so many times that jurisdictions just have to have evacuation protocols. But when you're in the mountains, it's so infrequent, and and we hope it stays that way, but we just don't have protocols. So we would argue the first challenge is we've got to do a better job on preparedness and predicting. I mean, we all have cell phones that can do just about anything. There's technology out there, but right now, individual, like fire departments and assistant fire chiefs have to make the call for each community. And I would argue there's a better way to use technology and invest in technology like coastal cities do. This shared responsibility goes across everybody in the floodplain, from the property owners to their tenants, to the business owners, from the top to bottom. Like, these need to be ecosystems of shared risk and understanding. If you're going to be there, you've got to all be able to plan and prepare accordingly so that you can manage your losses. And there's, we're not saying don't be in floodplains. This is America. We have private property rights, we have capitalism, and we have human nature. So it's a complicated space. But if you're going to be there, you've got to be there with some resilience, risk management, and innovation. The part that's really hard for me personally is homeowner versus commercial. If you have a commercial business in a flood-prone area, that's a calculated risk. Lean into it, run the math, make sure the math works for you, make sure you like the risk. That's a business decision. It's the residential component that's a lot harder to wrap your brain around, especially in communities. We live in Black Mountain, we drive through Swannanoa, this is generational land. Their options are far and few between. They're going to build back where they are. So that's a tough one. But commercial, I'm like, you do you. If it makes sense, do it with acknowledgement and responsibility and share it. You can structurally reinforce, you can renovate to withstand flooding, you can elevate, you can innovate. At the end of this, if we have time, I'll talk about a project that RiverLink is partnered on in the River Arts District on visioning and planning with a $100,000 grant to look at how the craft community can return with more built-in resilience. But more importantly than anything, if you're going to be in a floodplain, we've got to remain uncomfortable all the time. And that's the danger between 1916 and 2024, is we got way, way too comfortable, RiverLink included. Okay. Let's talk about riverbanks, because there are wonderful natural systems that can really help with all of this if we understand them and advocate for them better. So any river in the Southeast wants a riparian zone, and that's that beautiful multi-species, treed, shrubbed, grassed buffer. This is what a river would look like if we didn't get involved. It's got a bunch of purposes. It has incredible natural purposes for water quality, with sediment issues, for habitat. But for people, it's wonderful because it can slow down the water and keep things in the main channel, right? So if you've got routine flooding and you have a healthy riparian zone, you're not looking at high velocity, things careening into you. Like I said, they're this wonderful mix of trees and shrubs and ground cover. Ideally they're mostly native, but even if they've got invasives in them, they play this incredible role. But what happens is, and these are pictures, my pictures from the RAD, when we develop them, and it starts with the railroad coming through, right? We pick the path of least resistance in our really steep sloped areas. So when you develop a corridor like that, trees get removed and get removed and get removed. What then happens is the remaining trees, like, does this look like a riparian zone anymore? Like, no, it's a handful of solo trees. And unfortunately in Helene, probably a third of them in the RAD fell over because they didn't have any of their supporting network. This is French Broad River Park in the RAD. So once you start getting this extreme erosion, because what goes on below a riparian zone is a massive root system that is matted together and holds the bank together. And it's very hard to lose land if you have a riparian zone. If you don't, you end up getting just extreme bank erosion, and you can get infrastructure loss and damage. The Greenway completely fell in through here. So now it begins this chain of impacts when you don't have a riparian zone. You start to lose land, the river widens, you increase the sediment in the water. So sediment is the #1 pollutant and threat to the French Broad River watershed before the storm. And now we have so many more sources of sediment. And when you get choked with sediment, the fecal coliform can bind on, and that's where you get into that problem. You get this bank collapse and slumping. A riverbank, once eroded, can't naturally restore itself. It just keeps cliffing and cliffing. Then you get faster flows, exacerbating more erosion. Then you get further loss of the riparian. It just keeps collapsing. You have overall water quality decline. It's horrible for habitat, and it's damage to property, and it's a biofeedback loop. So it just keeps happening. So if you don't intervene, even small erosion can escalate into large-scale bank failure. There's a picture in Swannanoa. The bank still looks like this a year plus later. So 2 takeaways from that. Please don't remove riparian zones and or damage them going forward. Like, we've got to be so mindful of the remaining riparian zones in the system, and if you ever have an opportunity to advocate for them. And secondly, recognize what it takes to reinforce and restore riverbanks when they've already been compromised. So City of Asheville, they've got 2 major river-related recovery efforts going on right now. One's the French Broad River Front Parks recovery, so that's the down in the RAD, the parks in the Greenway, and then the other one is up the Swannanoa and the Azalea Park corridor. These are $50 million projects that the city has out. That's how much damage has been done to these banks and to these systems. And then RiverLink, a post-storm, and just seeing what happened in Swannanoa, thanks to the Community Foundation of Western North Carolina, they funded us early on to engage with Wildlands to do a detailed assessment and evaluation of the bank damage of the middle Swannanoa. So this is like 7 miles that runs from Black Mountain to Warren Wilson. And we wanted to understand what had happened there, and then if we could help pursue repair and restoration. And so that 7 miles was assessed. Wildlands calculated over 40 acres of riparian buffer was lost, so that whatever little buffer was there before, a bunch was lost. 104 properties were damaged across 71 property owners. It's going to be 10 to 13 million to structurally repair. And this stuff here isn't like live staking and just the lower level repair. This is structural repair. These banks are so collapsed. They need tows, they need, engineering, they need planting. But it just gives you a sense. It's $400 to $500 a linear foot to repair a bank. So once they get damaged, this is such a cost prohibitive effort. And this does not include any human infrastructure. This is just the cost to the banks. So RiverLink's made a 5-year commitment and are working with property owners, and we are going to put together, we just got a North Carolina Land and Water Fund planning grant. We're going to get this stretch qualified for its 9-element plan, which then makes it eligible for EPA monies for repair. But I mean, it's a journey, and it's years in the making and millions of dollars. So incredibly costly to go back and repair overdeveloped and damaged riverbanks and corridors, and it's almost always outside of any federal funding. The FEMA funding works if you have infrastructure that fell in, but if it's just nature and that damage, you're kind of left with organizations like RiverLink and pursuing grants. Okay, final topic, and then we'll just wrap it up with some summaries. We've got to lessen our urban pressures in these floodplains if we want a different outcome. So I think we want to reduce the loss of lives, livelihoods, and damage to the environment, right? We want to reduce all that. We've got to remain sensitive to private property rights. There's a lot of private property throughout our floodplains, and that's fundamentally important to recognize. So what would true resilience in a floodplain be? True resilience would be it never got developed in the first place, or it never turned into private property originally. So like, this is a project down with Conserving Carolina down in Henderson County. Different animal down there, wide, spread out, more agricultural, but they were able to secure some land and reintroduce and restore wetlands and benching on the French Broad. And so when the storm happened, they were able to hold billions of gallons down there. So this is the ideal, but this is not where we are in most of our places. So probably the most hopeful tool in the toolkit, even though it's highly flawed, would be the FEMA buyout program. And so the concept of that is, what makes this program amazing is it is a voluntary program for the landowners, and it's for people that are just flood damaged and ravaged and don't want to do it anymore. And it's a federal program where you if you enter it and if you're accepted, and it's in partnership with the state, and we chose here to go state-centric, so North Carolina State runs it for us here in Buncombe County. If you qualify and enter, you actually get market value the day before the storm. So these properties had high value before Helene. And then ultimately, if they make it all the way through the program, all the infrastructure is removed. The owner is made whole, the infrastructure is removed, and then it's turned over to the jurisdiction. So if it's Swannanoa, it'd be turned over to Buncombe County because Swannanoa is incorporated. And then it stays as passive floodway space. It can be activated for recreation. There's quite a few things you can do with it, but you can't ever build and develop on it again. Is it perfect system? No. We have 350 people in Buncombe County that have entered a form of the HAZMAT program. They're either in buyout, elevation, structural reinforcement, or landslide mitigation. It's cumbersome. The county's sheet kind of helps guide people. It's like up to 3 years. It's not a guarantee. At the end, you can get out at any point. Then the jurisdiction has to manage these. But this is one of the only real ideal ways to perhaps get development back out of the floodplain at the owner's choice. But you have to be in a position to be able to kind of endure the process. On a more day-to-day basis, we got to look at these areas and go, how can we create more open and green space in our flood-prone areas, right? So we have a do-over in the River Arts District. Is there an opportunity to introduce just a little bit more passive space? Can some properties be secured through the buyout, through straight-up acquisition? Not everybody had made it to the new economy in the RAD. There's still some industrial properties down there. So just looking for opportunities to just build in some natural space. Wherever we go, can we please use green infrastructure for all the other times we flood, small, medium, and large? Nature is designed to keep water on site and return it to the ground naturally. Pavement is designed to export it across land, pick up everything along the way, and dump it in the nearest waterway. So anytime we can add more green infrastructure, and it's so aesthetically pleasing. This one we're thinking a lot about. We've got many river parks just destroyed here and pulled offline. And they are part of Charles Owen in Buncombe County. That park was just decimated. The city's river parks throughout Asheville, Azalea. I mean, everywhere we have such damaged river parks. This is Karen Cragnolan Park. She is modest in her infrastructure. We activated, built her greenway, did her pollinator meadow, and activated her, connected her to both other sides. What was that, 3 years ago? But this was extraordinary because this park had over 20 feet of water on it, but everything was parallel to the river. All of our big, expensive, beautiful artistic signage is parallel to the river on the fence. And so we didn't lose anything. And look at our riparian zone and look at Biltmore Estates riparian zone across the way. We had 0 bank damage and our greenway was inset. And so we just had some stuff land on us and we lost a panel of fence down by Carrier. But we were able to get the site cleaned and back up and open. And this summer, the pollinator meadow was off the hook. It did not mind the sediment load and the things that came with the floodwater because it's designed to come out on the other side. So we're really advocating as the city is planning and working on their river parks, like maybe less infrastructure. People want infrastructure, but maybe in our public spaces, we have to design them for the river and can get them back online and not lose 2 or 3, 4 years. Future greenway locations in their proximity to river and streams. We're big fans of greenways. We're big fans of connectivity. Post-storm, we're talking to everybody about we have got to figure out a way to back these up because we are compromising those banks. If you have a greenway really close to the top of bank, it should be the riparian zone. Now it's a greenway. It's complicated because right-of-way acquisition is expensive. Most of this area is developed, so even threading the needle from an acquisition perspective. But we've been talking with everyone, city, county, engineers, feasibility study planners. How do we do this better? Because we have a living lab right now of greenways in the river and banks that are highly eroded. If the greenway didn't go in, the banks are just cliffing out. Something's got to give here if we want a different outcome. And then just this is a picture from like Swannanoa. Like, we can't keep doing this. We cannot put this much stuff in our floodplains and have a different outcome. Or how do we keep doing this to nature? And then who's going to advocate for ecological restoration of all this? The damage is still hugely extensive. The debris cleanup was helpful for the aspect of the debris cleanup, not helpful for the over-aggressiveness of the debris cleanup and the incentives being wrong and further damage being done to the banks. But a lot of landowners feel like, well, the debris cleanup came through, I'm good, right? And we're like, oh my gosh, but your bank is not set up to be a natural system, right? It's just going to keep eroding and you're going to keep losing land. So let me just summarize from the top and then love any questions or feedback. Number one, you read that article and watch that show, and flooding is becoming a way of life in the nation, the globe, and in our backyard. We are going to keep seeing nuisance, small and medium flooding, and now our region is defined by an extreme event that we've all lived through. We have a really unique and potentially dangerous setting because of these steep mountains and these rivers that roll through the valley floors. That double stacking of two events is not that unlikely. It doesn't take much. And by the way, the first system can pull the second system in. So all these catastrophic events were because of two systems on top of each other. And I think it's highly likely that'll happen again. The Swannanoa, in particular, has a monstrous watershed. We cannot engineer our way out of the Swannanoa situation. We've got to figure out how to live with her better. Can there be some flood benching? Yes. Can there be for minor and medium flooding better ability to capture some water and prevent downstream flooding? Sure, if someone had land and could do that. But for a catastrophic flood, you got to get out of the way. These storms are getting stronger and wetter. Our climate and these microburst events, we've got to figure out how to adapt. I would argue we have a natural disaster advantage when we are in a floodplain, recognizing that it is a floodplain, and how can we live and respect that accordingly. We've got to get away from that FEMA 100-year situation. It did not serve us well at all, and it hasn't served any other regions. We've got to find a way to think about that more dynamically. And we cannot deny this risk. It's not a matter of if, it's when. And once again, it's a tremendous shared responsibility to be in a river's floodplain. We need to recognize the extraordinary value of riparian zones, and we better be prepared to pay the price when they're compromised or removed due to development. We like view sheds, we like seeing the river. Like, we have a lot of things that aren't helpful as human behavior, but these are priceless in our protection from our infrastructure and flooding and from the water quality and all the other that we built on this, amazing system. Once we start experiencing riverbank erosion, it is a feedback loop. It is difficult and expensive to stop and reverse. And then, please don't let our future actions compromise banks further. And when we build in public spaces, can we do that more innovatively to inspire the private sector? And can we figure out in those public spaces, in particular in those river parks, can we build to the river, not against her? Lastly, we've just got to look for any opportunity to lessen the impact in these corridors. You can talk to communities that if they had two major flood events back to back, then they started really retreating. But the danger is if too much time goes on, we forget. But we've got to figure out a way to get some of the stuff out there, because if we put it all back and want a different outcome, that is the definition of insanity, like the literal definition of insanity. And then lastly, we've just got to continue to champion and advocate for the river's restoration and our banks' restoration, because it's just falling in jurisdictional no-man land a lot of the time. So I would offer, we've got to figure out how to thrive in and amongst our region's rivers. They are extraordinary economic treasures, right? We have so much built on their backs. They create unbelievable recreational opportunities. And environmentally, it's one of the most biodiverse special places in the world. But I definitely think our lives and livelihoods depend on us navigating this better. So thank you on that.
Lisa, first question. You mentioned earlier that there had been some efforts to figure how we could rebuild the RAD more resiliently and some of the things that are going on to make that happen. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
Why, yes, I can, Ken. This is a super cool project. It just didn't flow in the presentation in the middle of it, so I wanted to do it separately. But yeah, so RiverLink has that huge commitment to the River Arts District because we played a key role with our founder, Karen, in the original version of it. So after the storm happened, we felt compelled to return to our roots, and we were really fortunate. Unified RAD stood itself up. It's the artists, the businesses, they were all their own entities, but they weren't necessarily all working together in the RAD before the storm. And after the storm, they all came together under this umbrella called Unified RAD. And so RiverLink and Unified RAD were able to secure a $100,000 grant to return to our roots of kind of visioning and planning. And this grant was like around the craft community and them thriving and how to do it in a way that brought more resilience to the region. And so we did the old-fashioned charretting and surveying, very similar to what Karen did 40 years ago. And the process has been amazing. We stood up a steering committee that has, top city planner, head of the TDA, VP at the chamber, representation from all these stakeholders in the district. We had all these national firms vie for the business because, unfortunately, disaster recovery urban planning is an entire line of work now. There are so many communities that are doing this. And so the steering committee selected Sasaki. They led us through this beautiful process. We met in person with all district stakeholder groups. We did a survey that had 1,200 respondents. It hugely informed this process of what people cared about. From that, these project principles. And what was amazing is in all this input, everybody kept putting the river up at number one, which was really good for the heart of recognizing how important that is. And so what's been neat is Sasaki identified from all of this like 40 catalyst projects that we could look at in the RAD to help the RAD recover economically with the artists at heart that are highly resilient and appropriate for the circumstances. And so we're going to be debuting RADFest is this weekend, and we'll be there all day Saturday with some of these projects that they have fleshed out. These are all in addition to the private sector. They're not at the expense of the private sector. They're complementing what's going on. They're saying, hey, can you lease land and can you do some activations and can you create an open air market and food truck court? Like that's the type of thing that's so appropriate to be in a floodplain. It's portable, it's movable. And the list just goes on. And so it's been this really fun process. And then every organization, RiverLink and others, will work together and start grabbing some of these projects. Like one of them is a riparian nursery. And I'm like, stop it. For example, RiverLink could work a deal with the city or a private property owner and say, may we have half an acre, may we bring in soil, and may we bring in baby riparian trees, plant them, sign them, educate everybody. And in 2 years, city, you can have the riparian trees and plant them in your riparian recovery effort. Those type of projects that are highly grant fundable and just kind of bring the community to the opportunity. So, yeah. Does that cover it enough, Ken, do you think?
If you've got a question, raise your hand. We'll bring a mic to you. And please wait for the mic because people online will not be able to hear your question if you don't. And if you're online, please enter your questions into chat and we'll ask them for you.
Why don't you call on people?
Oh, sorry.
This was a good time to present. The Rotary Club is offering grants of $10,000 for folks to do projects that would help with the efforts of recovering Helene, and that sounds like a great project. So if there's anybody in this room that's interested in $10,000 or $25,000 to do a project like this, come talk to me after. Okay, cool. You need a
Actually, my daughter lives above Haw Creek, and her banks were devastated in the storm. We sat in the house and watched the Haw Creek come within 10 feet of her house. She now has flood insurance. When she first bought the house, they said, "Oh, you don't need flood insurance," the 100-year thingy. Yeah. She's like, "Oh yeah, I did," but they've gotten some help with restoring what was done to her lower property. It was a logging area initially. So there was this old logging barn, which this county came and got out. I don't know through what funds.
Nice, yeah.
Yeah, because there was a lot of yucky stuff. But the banks, there's now islands in the creek that weren't there before. You can see where the bank is, like you said, cliffing. And this is wonderful about the RAD. They're the big guys. But I don't see, and you're saying I drive through Sonanoa a lot. I still see a lot of yuck along there. What's being done, and where can somebody like my daughter, who still needs restoration, where do they go?
That's a great question. And there's a lot of programs out there, like if you're rural in particular, the county has a lot of resources.
She's real close.
Well, and I'm going to get into a program that we stood up to help individual landowners. But, there's programs out there and you've got to navigate them, right? Like there's the Emergency Watershed Protection Program. I mean, these are all, bureaucratic programs. But for landowners that have bank damage, like checking in, first of all, with the county and their resources. We also very early on, for a lot of landowners that didn't have significant structural damage, but lost all their plants and their trees, we stood up this Adopt a Stream program, and we got pretty well funded for it, and it's still running. You can always call RiverLink to come out and do a site visit on stream banks. And if it's something that we can do within Adopt a Stream, which is coir matting and planting, and not just live staking, like bringing in trees, but if it's structural, we can refer. But this is the problem. We have waterways everywhere. And if they're structurally blown out and they're outside of a jurisdiction's domain or a nonprofit's, ability, I mean, you're kind of making my case of this is the reality of how much damage was done to the waterways. But I would say, A, check with Buncombe County, B, have her call RiverLink, and they'll come out and do a site visit to see if they can help, and if not, make some referrals.
The Haw Creek Association is pretty strong, so I think.
Yeah, and they're probably really resourced too, but yeah. And I mean, people that can chase stuff down can find opportunities, but you have to fit kind of the right criteria and mold for each different program.
Yeah, first, thanks so much for the leadership that you've brought to RiverLink over the years you've been there. It's just been amazing.
You're just saying that because you helped hire me. And I am grateful.
Susan over there for writing the wonderful grants that have brought just a ton of money into RiverLink.
Yeah, no doubt.
I just wanted to second the reference there to that PBS super floods. It's a really eye-opening look at what the whole weather picture could look like after a major flood. One of the issues, it's not directly in RiverLink's main lane, but they talk a lot about the landslide risk and how in the actual situation there were actually more deaths from landslide than there were from the flood itself, and that places like Craigtown and things suffered immensely for that. And I was just wondering, they talked about the extensive mapping, which I wasn't even aware of, up on the hillsides and the mountains that can help people identify the risk that they run by putting a house with that beautiful view of the mountains, halfway up the hill when the hill starts to slide. Number one, I'm curious where those maps are available. And two, I'm wondering, are you working with larger groups that are looking at potential risk of these kinds of weather events that affect the mountainsides and the hillsides as well as the river?
There's a lot in there that I've got to unpack. Yeah, the whole landslide situation, I'm not going to know the answer off the top of my head where those are housed. I don't know if that's USGS, but there has been extensive mapping. There's also been pushback on it because it creates property value issues. So I think there might have, in its history, I think there's been pushback at the General Assembly level. I am in a wildly dangerous territory of not speaking to facts right now, just general trends of understanding. But yeah, and that's the oversaturation of the watershed scenario, right? When that watershed's back gets broken because it had 12, 14 inches of rain from the precursor event, and then the tropical storm arrives, that's when all these landslides are going to get activated. In terms of working with people on the bigger, global thing, some days I get up and I look at the administration we live in right now and how we're going the opposite direction. We're stripping everything. NOAA is underfunded and all the meteorological information. When you watch super floods, right, you're like, they knew this, right? They knew a couple days out how bad this was going to be, but our system is sort of broken down to disseminate information boldly and confidently, and not have it wrong. So I just think the landscape is so complicated. I mean, it makes climate change almost feel reasonable, or to deal with climate change. Do you know what I mean? It's so large and problematic, and I think we're going to keep adapting. I think that's what we do. But some of these rain events, I think Vietnam got I want to say 5 feet of rain in 3 hours a couple of weeks ago. At some point, I don't know that we can adapt beyond that.
I'll just add about the mapping.
Please.
There was a state-funded program to map the slide areas. Unfortunately, a few years ago, some of the real estate interest complained to the General Assembly, and they stopped funding it. We're hoping this event will encourage them to resume that.
And have you guys had Philip Prince here as a speaker? The geologist, PhD geologist, landslide expert. Oh, you want him. He's amazing. He's with Appalachian Landslides, and he's also a professor. He's extraordinary. You guys should get him in here. He can tell you everything about landslides. I've met him. I co-host a radio show that I heard him on, and I was like, he's your guy.
I have a friend who is a good friend of Philip's. So if anyone here wants a landslide video, wants to see his landslide video that he made, talk to me.
And he did a whole series of YouTube videos during the storm, and they're incredible. And I believe he's the featured guest for French Broad River Partnership's upcoming event. I am out of town. It's November 17th, 18th, somewhere in there, but you should check that out. If you get a chance to hear him speak, he can really speak to landslides.
Also, Drew Ball, County Commissioner Drew Ball is on Zoom for the meeting, and he just posted that county probably has those maps for Buncombe County, and if you contact him at drew.ball@buncombecounty.org, he'll help you get access to those.
Thank you, Drew.
So I have a question. I'm concerned about, if you say, 100-year flood is now going to happen every 50 years or something like that. With all this work and rebuilding of the River Arch District, and that's a pretty wide basin there, are they doing anything to prevent another flood from doing the exact same thing? If they rebuild and 5 years down the road, they do the exact same thing again?
Yeah, and I mean, it's the same question, in any floodplain, right? The thing about the River Arts District that's interesting, and I've come to appreciate tremendously over the past 4 or 5 months we've been working on this project, is just the collegiality, the entrepreneurship, and the recognition of this environment and wanting to protect the river and wanting to be flood resilient. So above the railroad tracks, the River Arts District fared really well, with the exception of Town Branch, also known as Nasty Branch, getting really backed up when it has to go under at Depot and under the tracks. And it did some flooding on the upper deck. So the people that are building back in the lower areas they're really factoring all of this in, and they're doing reinforcement, and they're just making really smart decisions and making adaptable decisions. Like High Wires, down in the Rad is really kind of neat because their brewery is back, but they've added pickleball courts, and I think the e-bike guys are going to run out of there, just agile things that are just more compatible, and at the end of the day, it's their business choice, right? But as long as people lean into it, and I'd say all the people in the Rad are really pretty amazing that way.
And my only other question is with in terms, maybe RiverLink knows the answer to this question, but is the French Broad River navigable now? I don't see any boats on it. I don't see any people using it. I'm just curious if it's too toxic or if it's okay.
Yeah, it's not a water quality issue. And this summer was tough because a lot of the put-ins and the access points, if they were city held and they were in recovery, trying to get through the repair protocol. So I think you saw a lot of outfitters that were hugely damaged by the storm, and either some of them went to other sections of the river where they had access to put-ins and takeouts, like they went south. But I think by next summer, you would expect to see kind of more of that. The French Broad water quality is similar to what it was before. It suffers from sediment. So if you get big rain events and it's warm, and the sediment kicks up, it has water quality issues. I don't know that the storm dramatically changed anything other than caused more erosion, which is sort of the ongoing culprit. But I think you just saw an economy that was really hurt. I mean, a lot of their physical buildings were destroyed. But I think by next summer, it'll look more new normal. But great question.
Lisa, a follow-up question to that. RiverLink has an office in the floodplain down by the river. What are you doing differently to prepare for the next flood?
Well, we're a lot lighter now. We don't have 40 years worth of paper and stuff. And I say that flippantly, but also sincerely. RiverLink had been in that office, I'm looking at Susan, since 90. So unfortunately, we enter on the ground level, but we're actually off the deck. We're right down there on the two roundabouts. But we had about 4 feet of water in our office, so it floated and totaled everything. We no longer own our office, we're tenants, and so they did a full remodel, but it was a traditional flood remodel. It didn't have any structural damage, it was just your drywall, flooring, your usual stuff. So we go back in with a lot more sense of agility, responsibility, like we were dragging desktops and old things, and we're like, it is a world that we need to be able to get our stuff and get it out. And yeah, like we moved our vehicles because they were down at Riverside. We moved them up, but we didn't move them high enough. Like, we were we moved them above the tracks and they still had water. So it was a hard lesson. But I think we carry a lot of agility now, and in great part because we lost a lot of the encumbrance that.
I just wanted to say, whoops, my turn.
Yeah, I read something in the news about they want to build a huge music venue on the Swannanoa River, and I thought that was kind of strange. And I'm kind of wondering if you know anything about it or if you think that's like a good idea.
I think once again, when it comes to commercial endeavors, I think people, they just need to factor in all the mitigation and the risk. Everything I've read, I only know what I've read, but I think they're very flood aware and flood savvy in how they're thinking.
I'd be more worried about the pavement. That's what I was looking at.
Yeah, more impervious. I don't know if they're introducing a lot more impervious or not. I don't know enough. Susan, do you know?
We do know that it's going to be a 6,000 person venue, where compared to, say, Salvage Station, that was just 2,000 people, so a lot more parking. The city is asking them to be ready to get wet. They've been asked to design a stage system, a sound system, a lighting system that is ready for the Swannanoa to do what we know she does every so often. Anyone who builds down there is getting a different kind of a look from the city. We see evidence of that with their request for a permit to build that facility.
Last question. Do you know if they're doing impervious pavement? Permeable pavement anywhere in the area?
Yeah, so New Belgium has some, when they went in and up there, the whole new street they put in, they did with permeable pavers, and it's awesome and really forward thinking. They do require some maintenance, right? Because if you don't keep them clean, if they get sediment in them, they clog. I think too, it's always the tension of, you're spot on to ask about, we don't need more impervious surfaces, that's for sure, especially in the floodplain /corridor. We also just need more green infrastructure in nature, right? Because anything green stands a pretty good chance of coming out on the other side intact. So I think encouraging all of these endeavors to be like, how can you bring in as much natural amenities? They will fare well, they're beautiful aesthetic, and they're most appropriate for the environment.
Hi, I just wanted to ask you a very basic question. You mentioned riparian. How would you define that? What's the width of a riparian?
Oh, that's a great question. So I know our dear colleague, Renee, who runs our water resources program and is our director of programs, she's always like, look, if you can give it at least 50 feet, if you don't encroach more than 50 feet, that is a very healthy riparian buffer. I don't know if left to its own devices and if no humans were involved, I'm not sure how wide a riparian would go. But general practices are, if there's at least 50 feet of it, that's a really, really healthy amount. Even 30 feet. If you get down below that, some of these greenways are having to go within 10 feet of top of bank or less, just for example of kind of the pressure on the riparian zone in the bank. Great question, thank you.
There are questions on Zoom.
Hi, I was trying to get to the farmers. Oh. Okay, I was trying to get to the River Arts District Farmers Market today, and I took the wrong road, I guess. But what are they doing, just like, I guess it's north of Amboy Road? They were like digging giant holes in the river.
Yeah.
And I also passed that new apartment complex that's like right across from the Odyssey, all that. That just seems really wrong. I mean, and it went up really quickly.
Well, these are two very different questions. So what's going on in the river you're asking about is at French Broad River Park. The Metropolitan Sewer District is laying a new master line under the river. And so they have it cofferdammed and they're working in there. They need to cross the river there, and then they need to cross the river at Carrier. So there'll be that same type of project going on. And that's just, I think, has to do with the growing capacity of the region and, servicing that. I think the reason they chose to do it at French Broad right now is because the park was so damaged that it seemed like a better time, I think, timeline-wise, or how they're doing it, is to do it before the park is repaired. So that's what that project is. In terms of the residential piece, I mean, that's one of the biggest tensions, here is we need more residents, and there's not that many places to put them. The River Arts District, especially out of the floodplain, that's above the floodplain. I know Mountain True and their housing team is like, hey, out of the floodplain, the River Arts District is actually a great place for density housing because everything is on foot. Like, we had them come talk to us at RiverLink because we were like, tell us more. Is this good? Or our instinct is this doesn't, we don't know. And after that conversation, really appreciated how centralized it is. It's walking distance to downtown. So I don't know. All these topics are complicated. There's not a right or a wrong answer, but that is out of harm's way. It is above the floodplain. And did someone say there was some questions online, Ken? I can't see them, or I don't know how to see them. Sorry. Okay.
I'm monitoring the online, and
Okay, good.
so far I ask all of them.
Thank you.
What percentage of the city of Asheville is in floodplain?
Ooh, that is a Google question right now for someone. I do not know the answer.
The follow-up would be, what is the percentage of the county?
Yeah. Yeah, no, those are great. County is interesting because there's so much water, but on lots of secondary and tertiary, tributaries. I mean, if I try to drive right now and do that, something bad will happen. But somebody look that up quickly. That should be a quick Google at least. It should be fairly small, smaller than you think.
I moved down here from Ohio, and they had a flood like the 1913 flood. Killed 350 people, flooded downtown Dayton to the height of 20 feet. They did have come up with a Miami Conservancy District and built 5 dams to hold it back. What is the chance? I mean, you look at building, and I was a contractor too, To build in a floodplain just makes it economically impossible, to raise the house or whatever. What are the chances of capturing that water and metering it out somehow?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, humans are always interested in trying to manage it and engineer it. I think, was it 2007? I get my years wrong on this. I think they did a pretty big technical study to see if the Swannanoa could be managed or floodplained or contained. And I think it came back that everything was just cost prohibitive and not realistic. I don't think our region lends itself. I mean, I know lots of cities that live with big rivers, have had historic floods and then use dam control. I think we're in too tight of a footprint. I think we have too much of mountainous terrain. And we spend most of our time trying to free our rivers in the environmental movement. But I think flood benching on the French Broad down in its headwaters is great. I think the work Conserving Carolina's doing down there is amazing because you have the space, right? I mean, there's room down there. It's agricultural. Everything they can do to flood bench and hold is awesome. But once it gets in the corridors or the Asheville Basin or the Swannanoa, I mean, look how narrow that whole run is. And then in terms of elevating and building, if you're historic and you have less than 50% damage, or if you're historic, that's one category. If you have less than 50% damage, you have different options. It's the new builds, that have to come in 2 feet above base flood elevation. And so you kind of see a mix of old and new.
But if you're 50% or more damaged, you can get federal help to raise your house.
That's that FEMA Elevate or that buyout, yep.
Some of the municipalities specifically New York have taken that flood elevation because we keep on raising flood elevations to Cornell or above Cornell, or, they did the study in the, I guess, late 1990s into the 2000s. Is there any talk or desire from RiverLink to increase above that? Because it's all linked to 1 or 2 feet above that and parallel construction and the water-resistant construction. Is there any thoughts on Buncombe County maybe adopting something more than just, hey, you need to build above, 2 feet above the floodplain, or residential 1 foot? Because 1 foot's not very much anymore.
Yeah, and I think Asheville a year ago raised it by an additional foot, right? I think it took it up.
But unfortunately, we're limited by state regulations. We can't be more strict than the state. And so we've gone as much as we can do in Buncombe County and Asheville, but we're not legally allowed, thanks to our Mother May I state that the legislature controls everything, to do anything else, to increase those standards.
And, in the West, we've got a whole different situation going on here. So it's unfortunate because what we need here, given our geography and our river behavior, is different than the rest of the state. Yeah, I think so. And yeah, RiverLink, we don't do a whole lot of policy advocacy. It's not our lane of expertise, but we just continue to champion, advocate, and raise awareness around the importance of our rivers and how to view our rivers as assets and how to treat them as assets and how to try to get some of the pressures off of them and replace it more with green infrastructure. So, we spend a lot of time in those lanes. We're partnered with we've built a couple parks with Explore Asheville and TDA investment. So we constantly stay in business conversations, just trying to raise the profile of the river.
The Sierra Club, on the other hand, does focus on policy and legislative actions. So that's kind of our lane.
So just to reiterate that, FEMA was the one that came in and changed policy in New York City because they said, hey, that's great, Buncombe County, City of Asheville, we'll pay for it this time, but next time, unless you go and adopt our above the,
5. I think it's, the code is actually 5 that regulates it. You have to go to this, otherwise we're not going to reimburse you next time.
Yeah, the big lever is flood insurance. There are some requirements you have to meet for flood insurance, and Lisa can speak to that probably better than I can.
Not necessarily, but I will say flood insurance pretty much is going to govern what we do and don't do, and it's going to become so cost prohibitive. We saw a 100% increase in the policy and the RAD, and I know others saw, even more. So one day, the economics of that, but then I heard a big NPR article that private flood insurance is starting to stand up all over. So if it gets privatized, maybe we just keep marching on and paying more and more and more.
Question, you say 2 feet above flood level, but the flood level keeps changing, doesn't it? I mean, what is our flood level now?
Yeah, it depends on what your topography is, but it's 2 feet above base flood elevation, right? And so it depends on what your distance and what that number is, depends on your distance and elevation from the river. But if you were building down in the RAD really close to the river, I want to say the base flood is like 12 or 13 feet. So, and you would want to protect your investment beyond that, given what we saw in Helene when she's coming through at 24 feet.
I had a question about the FEMA buyout program. So as properties make their way through the program, will they become public, the locations, and will RiverLink be engaged to consult on what to do with those properties?
Well, that's such a great question. Thank you. Yeah, so depending on whose jurisdiction they're in, if they journey to the end and the state is like, okay, yes, they've met all the criteria, and I think it's like an 80-20, federal is 80, state is maybe 20 on this go-around with Helene. If the jurisdiction says yes, and we're encouraging all the jurisdictions to say yes, then organizations like RiverLink are like, please let us help, because there's like maybe 3 different types of these properties, right? Some are just residential. Swannanoa has some buyouts from the 2004 storm, and you might not recognize them because they're just passive, lots in neighborhoods. But and the county actually owns a couple properties on the Swannanoa that have bank damage. So we're talking to the county about helping them, but they're from former buyouts. This time around, if you start to see contiguous ones or you start to see ones that could be activated for public use, then organizations like ours and others are saying, let us help you. Let us chase down funding to get the amenities. You still work with FEMA to get approval, but early on, I got to hear the state hazard mitigation officer talk. There's a lot of innovative things that can be done, and huge respect for the jurisdictions, because it's taking properties off the tax rolls and it's adding them to their management. So I don't want to diminish for a second the burden, but the opportunity in our mind is extraordinary, right? Because you get a chance to A, give it back to the river, and B, activate it in a way that, yes, could be used for public. There's cool stories throughout North Carolina how some of these properties have been used. But it's long-term. I think the county's hot sheet shows like 0 to 3 years to get them closed and to even raise the buildings. I mean, it's a long, haul, and due to the federal government process.
Well, folks, I think we'll take one more question, and then we will appreciate Miss Lisa Raleigh.
I wanted to ask about Biltmore Village. You talked about the Swannanoa, and it's the Swannanoa that comes through there that seems to be a particularly precarious area. Any plans for that area?
So RiverLink's not working directly there. I know those guys, they have practice, right? Because the village has been inundated numerous times. But I've heard panels and seen some of the businesses and heard some pretty neat things like, if you're gonna, a lot of historic buildings there too, right? So it's really, this history part is enormous too, because you want to keep your history. But some of the property owners are, pretty amazing, saying, look, we used to have our power and all of our ductwork and everything, in lower levels. We're finally going to invest and put it up top. Like, we're going to prepare to get wet again, but we're going to protect the investment and greatly reduce the loss. And that's kind of what I'm talking about when I say, if you're in the commercial sector, own it, lean into it, and figure out how to do it better if you're going to stay there. And so I think you'll see over time a lot of adaptation. And there is some stuff over time that's been elevated, right? before my time here. But it's a journey in these spaces, and it takes years and years and events, and change kind of works its way. But yeah, that's a precarious flood space. I mean, full stop, right?
So we want to say thank you. What an incredible presentation.
Thank you.
And if you have questions, of course, Lisa would be happy for you to contact her at RiverLink. But I want to invite you back December 10th, the second Wednesday at the church, Unitarian Church. Bring a potluck. How many of you think you might come? Oh, good, good, good. Please do. We would love it. I didn't tell you that we're going to have a brief presentation by Randy Talley of Green Sage on what's called a nothing cup. It's like a revolution of a paper cup that is just totally environmentally friendly. So you will be very impressed. So thank you. Please do come.